In the Championship last weekend, it was Farker hell for Cardiff. The Welsh club leaked 7 against Pirot et al. Solomon and Joseph and James made things biblical. Truly a trip to Elland back. Argyle, working hard or hardy working? Both. Ryan at the double, beating West Brom, the latest episode in this very watchable sitcom. Stoke and Robbins rob a win. And Coventry find out that in the EFL kingdom, it's perfectly legal to harm, kill or disturb swans, and actually quite straightforward. In League One, wild things, shrews cannot be tamed. No Barry, no worries for Stockport. Up in 4th, Huddersfield get a shoeing from Cobblers, Shoeys. Bolton start with a wobble, and it's a doddle for Bristol Rovers and Stevenage. Exeter and Posh once again reduced to rubble. In League 2, clean up on aisle 24. Carlisle a mess again, and Williamson is sacked. But the Holloway is up for Swindon. And is there more to come for Morecambe? Now they've got Dallas. Houston, we may have solved their biggest problem. That and more in today's NTT20 Monday pod, probably punctuated by some yelps in reaction to any big transfer deadline day breaking news. I'm Ali Maxwell. He's George Elek. Welcome.
Wow. Welcome. Thank you. How are you?
Very well. Very well. A little stressed because Monday pod prep, always fun, always exciting. On top of that, we're just getting pinged with done deals, and we love done deals on deadline day.
Yes, deadline day, Monday morning pod, which means that we're probably going to have some stuff going on as we record. Normally, when we finish the pod, you have to upload it. I write TLS, but today we've got loads to do because we've got transfers to write up. Got to be on the ball. We're not doing our usual live blog for various reasons, but we are still going to be putting out loads of transfer content in the next 24 hours on ntt20.com, including the 20 best deals in our mind and a rundown when the window closes of all the deals done today. So make sure, if you haven't already, do subscribe to ntt20.com. We think it is the best football written website in the whole world. So There you go.
I truly think that, and I don't think that bias exists in this instance. And I just want to say a massive thank you to Sam and to Hugh and to Matt and to Craig, who have been incredible and been the backbone of NTT20.com's January transfer coverage, which I know all of the subscribers, paid and free subscribers, have absolutely loved. So thank you. And we keep going. That big bulletin will drop in your inbox before you wake up on Tuesday morning. The biggest and best deals from deadline day. You'll get all of them in your inbox if you're a paid subscriber of NTT20.com. This week's Championship recap starts with the Championship's first 7-0 win since the 2nd of May 2022. That was Fulham 7, Luton 0. Fulham won 7-0 3 times that season, George, which I'd already forgotten, but which seems quite remarkable. This time it was Leeds 7, Cardiff City 0. 1972 is the last time Leeds have scored 7 in a league game. They've got a 5-point gap to third place now. It was 2 for Pirot, 1 for Solomon, Aronson, James, Nyonto, Joseph. 3 assists. 3 assists? 3 assists for Junior Firpo. It's going to be that kind of pod today. George, by the end, Cardiff were pleading for mercy.
Yeah, I think in many ways this has to be one of the most dominant performances we've basically seen from a Championship side over another in recent history, because the scoreline, often when there's a 7-0, I often think, the scoreline can flatter the home side a bit, or the team that win a bit, and it can often be not quite as simple as the scoreline suggests it is. But this was incredibly one-sided. Like, the XG totals for Leeds over the course of the game were near enough 5, depending on your data provider. And Cardiff only had 2 shots in the whole game, and they're both from range. Like, it was just a consistent ability from Leeds to carve out plenty and very good goals from opportunities. When you look at the actual goals themselves, I think part of it is
quite similar, didn't they?
Yeah, I think basically what happened is, we know that Omaritza as a manager is someone who encourages his teams. He doesn't want to be a reactive manager. He wants to be a proactive manager, and he wants to encourage his teams to play relatively attacking football. And it felt like if they had just stepped off a little bit from Leeds, if they were just happy to concede a bit of space, then Leeds wouldn't have found it so consistently easy to get in behind. And that's what kept happening. Whether it was Dan James for the first 2 assists, or Solomon or Firpo, consistently they were getting into areas behind the back line and able to play these kind of checked balls back into the middle of the park, which were easy to fire home. And I think when you're a side who are making it easy for the opposition to get those cutbacks, you're going to be on a hiding to nothing. And that's exactly what happened here. So, yeah, I mean, I was really impressed by Leeds. I think continue to show they are the best team in this division. And especially at Ellen Road, basically no one can get near them. I almost think the Leeds at Ellen Road are probably operating like a mid-table Premier League side, frankly, such as their dominance in every single game that they're playing at home. And even in games where they don't win, that it's not because they aren't playing well or dominant, it's because in both boxes something is going wrong. And that's not happening as much as it was at the beginning of the season. I think Cardiff have to find a way just to dust themselves down and forget it ever happened. They've been in a good run of form going into this game. I think you can write it off. Like, look at Oxford, for example, whose last defeat was a 4-0 defeat at Ellen Road, and since then are unbeaten in 9. There's no reason why this should spell doom for Cardiff fans. But Leeds just absolutely flying. And the most impressive and dangerous thing about them is you look at the goal scorers: Peru, Aronson, Joseph, Solomon, James, Nonto. They're all consistent goal threats whenever they play, and that's what makes them so hard to defend against.
Yeah, Cardiff have a cup game next up against Stoke, which is possibly a good thing, I guess, and then Pompey away in the league once they're back. They've got Argyle and Hull in their next 6 league games as well, so big couple of weeks for Cardiff. I like that the first goal was a counter-attack from Cardiff's own attack, and then, as you say, it was just kind of copy and paste, rinse, repeat. But we've got to talk about Dan James. He was the star here, and I think he's been one of the stars of the league this season. And he's got 8 goals and 6 assists. Per FBref, he has not only the highest expected assists number in the Championship this season, but he's also taken the second most shots per 90 and the most shots on target per 90. So there's an argument that in that sense, James has been both one of the premier goal threats in the Championship this season and its premier creative player. He's had a shot on target in each of his last 8 league games, James. And this was a trend that started last season. He just started to look so much more sure of himself, so much more composed in that final moment, that final action of the attack. And the output has followed with it. It's clearly the best he's ever been right now, hitting 27 years of age. And while he's always had the pace, which will define his game, his ability to improve in terms of end product has meant that, he is now absolutely worthy of another shot at the Premier League, where he probably feels like he either didn't get the best opportunity, that move to Manchester United, and maybe wasn't ready for it in the first place, but he'll be there next season. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he does. I think he might have even simplified his game a bit, Dan James. He's not trying to be something that he's not, right? So these days, wide forwards, wingers in the Championship, they're often 1v1 dribblers, but James doesn't really dribble at all. He completes among the fewest dribbles of any wide player in the Championship. I think only Matt Ritchie, in terms of out-and-out wide men, completes fewer dribbles per 90 than Dan James. But he plays to his strengths, which is obviously his speed, his acceleration, his agility, and his ability to make quick runs in behind and be found by that pass threaded between the centre-backs and the full-backs. I think there's a tactical point here as well about basically on-ball players versus off-ball players, right? So a player's technical ability on the ball is easier to see than what they do off the ball, and it's easier to measure than what they do off the ball. So it's easy for us, and anyone really, to watch an attacking player and depend what they do when they have the ball at their feet, decide whether they are good or bad or indifferent, whatever the case may be. But an off-ball player is so important to a really good attack. And this game was a great example of that, because Leeds have got loads of on-ball players, as I would call them, Solomon and Ramazani and Gnonto. But there's a reason James is starting over Gnonto, over Ramazani. And it actually made me think about England in the summer, George, England in the Euros in the summer. On the England pod, from before the tournament started, we talked about England needing to have someone making runs off the ball in behind to keep the defence honest. Because if everyone just wants it to feet, you could be the best dribblers, the best short passers in the game, but you don't have that penetration. And I think what James offers is probably, more than anyone else in the Championship, incredible danger in terms of being a penetrator. And we saw it here against Cardiff, where the timing of his runs and the speed of them so difficult when you've got good passers in the team, playing in the 10, playing in central midfield. they're going to find him. So I've been so impressed with James. I think what he represents is something really important for people to remember, that it's not all about what a player does in terms of his ability on the ball, but actually having an off-ball threat as well, crucial for any multi-dimensional attack. The extended highlights on the EFL YouTube channel, the commentator was so excited by this, George, that he was happy to say professionally, no Willie, no party, when Gnonto scored, which I thought he's really feeling himself there. A couple more Leeds stats before we move on. 54 shots on target faced in 30 games, Leeds. That's 1.8 per game. Less than 2 shots on target faced per game this season. In the last 13 games, they've only faced more than 2 shots on target in a match once. So it was only a couple of weeks ago we were all getting very worried about Ilan Meslier, but actually they're avoiding the issue because he doesn't have to make more than 1 or 2 saves a game anyway. Big winners of the weekend, Leeds United. Beneath them, George, Derby 0, Sheffield United 1.
Yeah, another really frustrating day this for Derby, who have come unstuck again in a relatively tight game, I would say. And Derby now in 22nd in the relegation zone. And, to my mind, I know that it's not a very happy camp now, and it feels like Paul Warne is teetering on the edge of his job. But still, when you look at the teams down there, I still think Derby are not putting in performances that are necessarily as bad as others, but they just have a complete inability to get points in tight games, and this was another example of that. The goal came from a combination of 2 Sheffield United strikers or attackers who've been brought in over the course of January. Now, Chris Wilder loves signing strikers in January. It happened at Oxford, where in the season we went up in 2020, he decided to bring in like 5 strikers in January to replace those that were already there. And when it came to the playoff final, basically none of them were in the squad anymore because it was back to Constable, Midson, Green, those who started the season there. He did it consistently at Northampton, where again in January there'd be an influx of strikers with varying levels of success. He's done it at Sheffield United in the past. He just cannot help himself to go out and strengthen up top. And normally, I think it's to his detriment when normally his teams are doing okay and the changes don't go particularly well. I think he might have nailed it this time in terms of the players they brought in. And I think even in this goal itself, you can see why I think Cannon and Brereton Diaz could be a really good partnership, because you've got someone in Brereton Diaz he's such a weird profile of player. He's someone who is really prolific, but he genuinely doesn't play as an out-and-out striker. He plays kind of off the right-hand side, but he isn't someone who's going to ever come and be a ball carrier or stand a man up or really play as a regulation wide man. He's basically someone who just goes into space from that right-hand side and does it pretty well. But in Cannon, you've got somebody who does play through the middle and can be a poacher and can be a penalty box player, but he's also very, very good at running the channels. He's really energetic. He can play across the front line. He's a threat from range too. And even in this goal, you've got Cannon pulling out to the left-hand side, turning provider for Brereton Diaz, who found the space in the middle to divert home. You've got a really nice mesh of attributes between the two of them. And, at the end of the day, that was the difference between the two sides.
And for Derby, it's 4 home games in a row without scoring all season. And frankly, in Warne's entire career as a Championship manager, they've been good at home, competitive, more than that, just strong at home and pretty poor on their travels. And so the concern is always when the home form starts dipping, what else is there? They've lost Aaron Cashin, very much cashing in on him, moving to Brighton for loads of money in one of the most protracted transfer sagas I can remember. Good luck to him. Great price for Derby to get. And I think it's always worth pointing out what an incredible batch of young players they produced over a couple of years, of which Cashin was just one. It's obviously an academy that took a massive hit when the club was suffering financially. And so I think they lost quite a lot of the good work that they had done and built up. But Cashin, just another shining light from the Derby County Academy. And I think those involved there should be very proud of that and of him. Good win for Sheffield United. They're now 3 points ahead of Burnley, who drew 0-0 with Portsmouth. Now, Burnley should have had a penalty here. There was a handball that wasn't spotted, not given. And I think the subsequent chat would be different if they'd left with a 1-0 win rather than a 0-0, but they didn't, so it isn't. The 0-0s, what the hell is going on? Like, we were talking about Burnley being excellent defensively and horrendous going forward after like 10 games of the season. Literally nothing has changed. We're 30 games in. They have drawn 10 games 0-0. 1/3 of their matches this season have been goalless entirely. They've kept 8 clean sheets in a row. Trafford has kept 21 clean sheets in 30 league games. It's astonishing. But so is the fact that this team that were playing in the Premier League last season, that have attacking names that are the envy of most teams in the Championship, outside of 3 big wins against Argyle the other week, and their first 2 games of the season, where they scored 5 goals, 4 goals, 5 goals. Outside of those 3 big exceptions, they've scored 22 goals in 27 games, and they're not doing enough to win matches. And that's going to undermine them, even if they keep a clean sheet in every single one of the rest of their games. 20 Championship teams have a higher non-penalty XG than Burnley. It's a very unusual situation that we have pretty much done to death already, that you can have a team that are probably going to end up being the greatest Championship defence we've ever seen, and might be so underwhelming going forward, so boring to watch for their fans, that they could drop into the playoffs and potentially win the playoffs, and everyone will be left feeling a little cold. It's a strange situation. Monday night should be fun. Sunderland against Middlesbrough, live on both Sky and terrestrial TV, this one, which should be a cracker. I'm kind of sad we don't get to break it down, because I think it should be one of the games of the season so far. On Friday night, Blackburn beat Preston 2-1 in the derby, and Rovers probably were the better side here overall, but it was still a game full of controversy, as the first game was with Bitegate. Maktar Gay scored a header for Blackburn. He's really grown into things, hasn't he? In the last couple of weeks, has gone from looking kind of bright and a bit of a handful, but also incredibly raw and technically poor, to like just a handful pretty consistently, and particularly how good he is in the air. He's got an incredible spring on him, and scored a nice header here. It was 2-0 to Blackburn, a Campbell penalty, kind of an unusual penalty award. You don't see many of these. Definitely doesn't mean it shouldn't have been given. Dom Hyam climbing to win a header, and Jack Watmore basically just heading him under his chin. Looked incredibly sore. I thought it was very brave from Dom Hyam, and I certainly thought it was a penalty. Even if Watmore was trying to play the ball, he didn't head the ball, he headed Dom Hyam's chin. And then in fairness, Preston probably should have had one as well. Right at the end, Potts at the back post, and it was Maktar Gay challenging for it. Again, he didn't head the ball, but the ball did sort of hit his arm while he sort of knocked Potts out the air as well. Probably should have been a pen, probably would have been 2-2, and that didn't happen. So I don't want to go too big on a Blackburn win, but it was a significant victory for them after a poor month or two, and it puts them in 5th because Borough didn't play on the weekend. They're playing on Monday night, and also, George, because West Bromwich Albion, who were ahead of Blackburn, are now beneath them. They went to Plymouth Argyle and lost by 2-1. Argyle's roller coaster season continues. They have huge main character energy in this season's Championship, despite being bottom. We can't avoid them.
Yeah, huge result for Argyle, who, after a first half where very little happened in the game, and for all the talk of Miran Muzlic's high pressing style, they were pretty resolute, I thought. They came up against a baggy side who under Tony Mowbray are going to look to dominate possession. They kind of let them have it, and were able to cope relatively well. What I really loved from this Saturday is, these days I feel like when new transfers come in, we just expect them to start on the bench and just to not really be brought in and straight away. I loved how many players who were seemingly signed like a day before the games on Saturday came straight into the side.
Yeah.
And none of that was more true than with Argyle, who Maxim Talovierov, their new record signing, played at left centre-back. Nikola Katic played at centre-back. We saw Puchas come straight into the side a couple of weeks ago when he joined. Baidu coming straight into the team to cross the leagues yesterday. We saw Jay Rodriguez starting up front for Wrexham after just signing from Burnley. It's good. I like it. Enough of this tofu-eating nonsense starting on the bench. Get him in there. And that was the case here with Argyle, who, given what they had done, given what they had, given the signings they've made and the players they brought in, for them to be pretty solid and look very good for the most part, I think Puskás in particular looks very lively in terms of his delivery with his left foot, and it was his ball in for Hardy that got the second goal. The first goal came from really good work from Jed Wallace. I absolutely loved Jed's celebration to the assist, where he seemed to absolutely lose it. And I think after quite a frustrating period in his career over the last 6 months or so, I think it looks like he's absolutely lovely being back in the goals and the assists and playing for Tony Mowbray. Diverted home by Malumbi, but good work by Wallace down the right-hand side and getting his head up and finding Malumbi to divert home. And from there, you probably anticipated that Argyle would lose the game, but a penalty got them back in it through Hardy. And as I say, a really good ball from Puskás off the left-hand side around the corner to Hardy, who had to have a couple of bites at it, but eventually got his finish away. Massive 4 points these in the last couple of games for Argyle, having picked up 1 point in 3 games prior to that at home and looking pretty doomed. I don't think anyone would have anticipated 4 points going to Sunderland and hosting Baggies. So they are still very much in this, and it was kind of feeling like maybe we were seeing the first relegation spot taken by Argyle, but that doesn't seem the case now with Argyle picking up points and keeping themselves in the battle.
Yeah, no idea who will go down at this moment in time. Stoke did themselves a favour by winning at Hull City. This was a massive game and a very significant result. It was Mark Robbins' first win in his 6th league match in charge of Stoke. 4 draws, 1 defeat. And now the 1 win, Matasso had ticked the box that you just discussed, has signed for Hull just ahead of their game against Sheffield United, started on the bench against Sheffield United, came off it, having just been announced that day, and then was in from the start here and scoring for Hull, the midfielder. But it was another new signing, Ali Al-Hamadi, that was very notable for scoring an equaliser, for showing some good speed and mobility to give Stoke something that they've been missing since Tom Cannon's recall from loan. And I just find Al-Hamadi interesting as a signing and as a championship striker, because I think we're so hot on Al-Hamadi this time last year. He was basically the biggest name in the EFL transfer window, in my opinion, coming out of League Two, because there are so few strikers of his profile, but so many teams in League One and the Championship are always looking for strikers of that profile, right? And so he was a massive deal and had an incredible start to the season in League Two. And he moved to Ipswich, obviously, and he didn't play very much for Ipswich, which was somewhat predictable. He still managed to score 4 goals in about 250 minutes in the Championship. He then, obviously, they're promoted to the Premier League. He has groin surgery in the summer, and then he's had 11 very short cameos off the bench in the Premier League. I don't think there was ever really much intention of Ipswich using him in the Premier League or expectation that he would be ready to play in the Premier League. So just been waiting for him to drop back into the EFL and work out where he would go. And I say where he would go because it might seem obvious for a guy that became a big name and was playing in the Premier League this year to be pitched towards the top of the Championship. But this is a guy that's barely played at this level or even League One level in his career so far. Now, having started this game, he's played 350 minutes in the Championship and scored 5 goals, which is pretty impressive. But 92.5% of his total career league minutes have been either in League Two or in the National League with Woking. So just a really interesting player to watch and get an idea of his true level, because he showed so much at Wimbledon, so much that you think would translate to the Championship. But you understand that playing striker in League Two, particularly when you've got Omar Bougel next to you, is very different to playing up top on your own in the Championship. One thing that's clearly not changed, and he showed it here, absolutely burning a Hull defender at one point and getting to the byline, he's still incredibly quick. And that's a great attribute for him to have. Scouted Football, our pals, did a great piece on him last January using skill corner physical data, sort of stuff that we now have access to because it's very, very expensive. Only clubs and Scouted have the pleasure of that. When he was in League Two, his physical data in terms of the intensity of his sprints and the speed of his sprints was basically he matched up pretty well with your average Premier League striker. So I think that's the sort of thing that Stoke have got here. So there you go. I'm really intrigued to see how he goes. It's obviously a great debut for him. He came off, I think with cramp rather than an injury. Moran came on and won the game for them, finishing into the top corner after a set piece wasn't cleared. Hull had quite a dominant spell at that point at 1-1, but Stoke get a corner, get the goal and win the game. Hull with a couple of good chances at 2-1. McLaughlin in particular drawing a good save from Johansson, and Louis Barry, he's a Hull City player now. So many transfers since we last spoke. He had a couple of shots on debut, but no goals. So a pretty open game. Hull with 23 shots, 9 on target. Stoke with 11 and 4 on target. But it's Stoke that leave with the valuable 3 points. couple more away wins, George, in a category that I'm broadly calling two teams in crisis against two teams.
That is a catchy name.
Tracking really nicely. Watford 0, Norwich 1.
Oh, Watford, what is going on? It felt, as soon as the team news came out and there was, no Rokovata in the side, you had Sissoko, who is not particularly popular right now, at Watford, back in the side and captaining the team. Just a general reaction from the fan base, questioning the selection itself and the quality, and where the quality has gone. We've seen Ebesele obviously go back to Udinese and be sent out to be sold to Turkey. Quadro Bar not in the side, Rokovata not in the side. It feels like things are unravelling pretty quickly at Watford, especially off the back of the rumours around Tom Cleverley's future. And I'm pretty surprised that we're going to be talking about managerial sacking later in the League Two section, but I'm kind of surprised that we're not right now with Watford, because it feels like it's going, even though I definitely think it shouldn't do, and Tom Cleverley will be incredibly harshly treated when and if it happens, but it feels like this is running its course very, very quickly. Norwich were by far the better side in the game. They were from basically the moment that they kicked off. Josh Sargent missed a really good opportunity to make it 1-0 when it was 11v11. And then Vaco Bio with one of the stupidest moments I think I've ever seen, where in the box he just decides to effectively arm Emilio Marcondes in the throat for very little reason that we could see, at least. And he was sent off, and correctly so. And after that, it was always going to be difficult for Norwich. Sargent eventually got his goal. And I was a little bit surprised by how Norwich kind of dropped off in the second half and Watford were allowed back into the game. But realistically, it was a relatively comfortable 3 points for Norwich, who continued their good form with Sargent back in the side. And Watford, their really strong start to the season. And it wasn't long ago that I was on a train to Vicarage Road with Dave Walker, doing a voice note for the Rickery End podcast, asking me if the playoffs and promotion was a realistic aim. Doesn't feel like it is anymore.
Groundhog Day for me. This quite a lot to say on Watford. I think I'll save that for a future week, perhaps, because I've got quite a lot to say about Swansea City as well. They lost 2-0 to Coventry. This was my nap on the betting show, so with apologies to anyone that listened to that. You'll know already that I'm pretty concerned about Swansea, that their form is horrendous on the pitch. They're showing a really worrying trait, which is completely folding once the first goal goes in against them, getting worse throughout games rather than better throughout games. It's concerning. And this was a game between one team in great form and very sure of themselves under Frank Lampard. Coventry have now won 4 league games in a row, and one team, in my eyes, kind of in the midst of some kind of implosion. Coventry rocked up and had the first 8 shots in the game. So it wasn't even a case, as it has been sometimes recently, of Swansea starting all right and then collapsing. This was just poor from the off. Sims scored the first goal, doing what he does very well. Runs in the channel, gets on the ball in behind, holds off a defender, holds the ball up, lays it off, gets inside the box and scores from the resulting cross. And the second goal came from Brandon Thomas Asante with a fantastic lob from 35 yards. First time after a square ball from Timon to Franco. Franco miscontrolled it, and Thomas Asante lobbed Vigouroux. And I couldn't help wondering when I watched that goal, was there a bit of a hole in Swansea's midfield? Was there something missing in Swansea's midfield? Specifically someone that loves receiving the ball hundreds of times a game, whose first touch is always immaculate, and who knows exactly what he's going to do with the ball when he gets it, and is comfortable receiving the ball under pressure. Because that seems like a good profile for Swansea to have, given that they have the second highest possession percentage in the league this season. And they did have a player for the last 10 years who was good at that. He was their captain, Matt Grimes, but he now plays for Coventry City, albeit didn't feature in this game. Sold to Coventry. I just cannot understand this, leaving aside anything from a footballing point of view. Firstly, I don't understand this from the ownership and the chairman's point of view. They're already under fire in a massive way. There was a report from Darren Whitcoop last week that a prospective sporting director hire fell through, and that Andy Coleman, the chairman, is overseeing recruitment. That's always a massive red flag. That's not a chairman's job. And they sell their captain, probably the player that outside of Cabango, the hometown hero. Well, not hometown, he's from Cardiff, isn't he? But the academy graduate, probably the player in Grimes that the fans connect the most with, have the closest relationship with, and he's sold to a divisional rival for an amount of money that it's not a bad fee for someone of his age, but it's not a game-changing fee for them. And I don't think that the fans would have that much confidence in that fee being put to exceptional use. We will see. I mean, they might be getting a kid from Man City that's highly rated, aren't they all? Jacob Wright, I think, captains Man City's PL2 team and is broadly of the same profile. There'd be a lot to ask him to come in and sort of straight away fill the boots of someone that's been playing at this level so consistently for 10 years or so. Lewis O'Brien is reported to have to be coming in as well. Obviously, give some legs and bite in midfield in front of the ball, but certainly not someone you would trust in deep build-up situations. So I'm concerned for them. They're certainly not safe, and another couple of defeats, things will get incredibly concerning. I just think tactically it's interesting as well from Luke Williams' point of view. Without Grimes, do you change the way that they play? Do you stop going short and through the thirds to the same extent because you don't have that fulcrum, that connector? Or if you do change, that means going longer a bit quicker, but they don't have the attacking players for that. They don't have anyone at the top of the pitch that you're going to, Ellis Sims style, that you'd hit the ball into the channel for. You'd expect them to speed past the defender and hold the ball up. So a real muddle, I think, at the moment, Swans. And Coventry didn't need to be at their best to beat them very, very comfortably. Cov obviously cruising really nicely here. Them and Norwich starting to hit their straps a bit more, and it bodes well for the playoff race. I think that's fair to say. We have Millwall beating QPR 2-1. Lively start to this one. Millwall taking the lead after 31 seconds and QPR equalising 1 minute and 48 seconds later. Connolly and then Lloyd 3 minutes in, 1-1. The game was won by a new signing for Millwall, Luke Cundle. Obviously seen him play at this level for Argyle, for Stoke City. Quite like him for Millwall. Energetic, box-to-box midfielder, can have an impact arriving late into the box in the final third. I think it's a good fit for them. And he nipped in front of Fox, who was kind of on his heels, Cundle on his toes, heading home the winner for Millwall. 3 wins in a row for them. And just amazing how quickly this looks like a very new-look Millwall side. Brand new front line, really, with Ivanovic now established at the top of the pitch, with Bangura Williams, who's come out of nowhere to start games in the after they sold Romain Essa. It's basically just a fantastic replacement, someone for the fans to get behind, someone who's played quite a lot of football, aged only 20, down in non-league, and kind of, knows how to earn the right to play, but also looks silky, looks skillful. Cundle, obviously, advanced midfielder. Connolly off the left, who's a good goal scorer. It's just, I'm intrigued to see how Millwall finish this season. 30 games so far, 10 wins, 10 draws, 10 defeats. Which column will have the highest number after 46? I'm kind of intrigued, because I think the fans were struggling to understand this new direction a few weeks ago. And now they've won 3 games in a row. Yeah, it's a lot easier to see it and believe in it, and appreciate what Alex Neil's bringing to the table. So Millwall beating QPR by 2-1. Finished with 2-1 draws. George, Sheffield 1, Luton 1, Oxford 1, Bristol City 1. Got a couple of minutes to sum those up for me. I'll be delighted.
Yeah, Oxford 1, Bristol City 1 was a game dominated by refereeing decisions. Williams sent off for Bristol City late in the first half. I think it was very harsh. I think Oxford were fairly clever in terms of surrounding the referee as soon as the pretty loose challenge came in. It was one of those where it was pretty out of control. It was pretty unnecessary, but it was a yellow card. I don't think it was particularly dangerous. And from then, I think Bristol City coped with the nature of the game very well from there, where Liam Manning brought Sinclair Armstrong on just to provide that really physical presence up front, who could even with 10 men off of that outlet going forward, and they're so good out of possession that Oxford didn't create a great deal. The goal itself from Greg Lee came in very weird circumstances, where a shot from Cameron Brannigan kind of ricocheted into his direction, and I assume the ball was kind of spinning in a weird way because he just wrapped his foot around it to try and kind of divert it into the box, and it was a cross that somehow went in at the far post. Mark Sykes scored a wonderful equaliser, training ground move. 2 players on the edge of the Oxford box. Cameron Brannigan obviously tasked with screening both of them, but the pass was played behind the first one, which I think diverted his attention to the first one. So he went, Sykes dropped back and just whipped it into the top left-hand corner. Bristol City then brought down to 9 men with McCrory, with no arguments about his sending off surely for 2 yellow cards. But after that, even 9v11 for the last 10 minutes or so, Oxford struggled to create anything of note. And despite going into the game probably thinking a point would have been a good result, we'll come away wondering how they weren't able to cause Bristol City more problems with a numerical advantage. The Luton game against Sheffield Wednesday, I think still massive alarm bells for Luton. They took the lead through a brilliant strike from Alfie Doughty. One moment of real quality for them, but realistically, it was Sheffield Wednesday who then came forward with a better side in it. Smith scoring from the penalty spot himself, Josh Windass missing a couple of really good opportunities to make the game 2-1. Still, Luton creating very, very little from open play and still conceding a lot in terms of chances against them. So, yes, Luton's losing record is over. Their winless record continues, and another performance I think is way below par.
To finish off the Championship segment, let's hit the FOTMob Corner button. As we record, it's transfer deadline day, and we got transfers on the mind. Specifically, me and George are going to pick out one transfer each from the last week or so in the Championship that catches our eye, and it takes us both to Sheffield. I'm in the blue corner, and I'm talking Stuart Armstrong, signed by Sheffield Wednesday permanently from the Vancouver Whitecaps, having spent all of 5 months in Canada in MLS. Since we last recorded, Wednesday have signed Ibrahim Sissoko too, last seen at Argyle on loan. But it's Armstrong I want to focus on, partly because I really like him as a player, and I think he'll make the Sheffield Wednesday team better immediately. I mean, this is a player with huge pedigree. Armstrong has never been a particularly sexy name since moving south after what was basically a whole career's worth in Scotland, first with Dundee United and then with Celtic. With Southampton, he was an incredibly consistent performer for a number of years in the Premier League, fit their style perfectly in terms of being able to do a lot of defensive work while also having quality in midfield, in possession and in attack, able to score goals. And last season in the Championship with Southampton, I thought he was one of the better players in the division. And I think he was a bit underrated. I don't think he was held up as someone that was having as big an impact as some of the bigger names in the division, like Somerville or Ruter at the time, or Dewsbury Hall, for example. But I really felt he was among Southampton's best players. And I think the fact he got injured just before the playoffs started meant that their promotion, not a lot got attributed to Stuart Armstrong, but I think he was excellent. As I say, he still contributes a lot to teams in attack and in possession as a midfielder, quality on the ball. He's got an eye for goal. He only played 410 minutes for the Whitecaps in MLS, but he did well. You can see from his FOTMob numbers, small sample size alert, but in terms of being a goal threat, in terms of being a creative passer and creating chances, absolutely excellent, among the standout players in his position in MLS. That was broadly similar with Southampton last season. His attacking numbers, in terms of goal threat, right up there among Championship midfielders last season. In terms of assists, expected assists, chances created, successful passes, down to Southampton's possession style, really, really good. And just someone that gets forward and impacts the game in attack a lot. Defensively, you have to wonder what his level is and whether he still has the athleticism. He definitely used to, as seen by him starting so many games for a Hasenhüttl Southampton team that needed counter-pressing energy. You have that thought that Danny Röhl wants that as well. The numbers don't look great in terms of what he did defensively at Southampton last season. Didn't win many of his duels, didn't make many interceptions or too many tackles. So that'll be quite interesting to keep an eye on, particularly because with Barry Bannon in midfield and Shea Charles, who has to do the work of two midfielders, basically. Are you a little bit worried about athleticism about those three as a whole, if it's Bannon and Armstrong, with Charles doing all the work? I don't know. On paper, it looks brilliant going forward, no doubt about that. I guess with Charles and Bannon in midfield, with Armstrong, as I expect it to be, it probably means pushing Josh Windass out to the right, which is not ideal, but probably fine, and keeping Gassama on the left as the dribbler, with Sissoko probably coming off the bench there. Up top at the moment, I don't think it's a great situation for Sheffield Wednesday. The Ugbo signing hasn't worked as expected. Jamal Lowe contributing bits and bobs, and Michael Smith doing pretty well, but doesn't feel like the sort of player that's going to be at Wednesday for the long term. The only issue I have with the Armstrong signing is it's just another old, quite expensive player, I think, for Sheffield Wednesday in terms of the wages, the transfer fee unreported. They are one of the oldest teams in the league already. Average age of the starting 11 over the weekend was 27.3. All three subs that came on were 31 and over. They have three young players, basically, Beadle and Shea Charles, who are not their players and will return to their parents' clubs in the summer. And then Gassama, who's basically the only under-23 player that Wednesday own that has played significant minutes and is a proper transfer asset. Now, signing Armstrong in isolation, I don't have an issue with. It's fine to sign older players to contribute straight away to your first team, and I think he will do that. but as part of the wider Wednesday picture and the way that they build their squad, and therefore how I think they'll be able to rebuild it over the next few years as they establish themselves at Championship level once more, just gives me a little cause for concern that they're not doing enough to bring the age down and start building maybe some assets that could help them financially as well. You wanted to go to the red half of Sheffield. Why?
Harry Clark came in last week on loan to the end of the season, and I just think it's a really smart signing. He's a player who was a pretty important part of Ipswich's amazing success last season, so that experience in terms of already having been part of a team that's won promotion to the Premier League, I think is relatively important. When you look at FOTMob's player rating, you look at the kind of top 10 of their players at the moment, Sheffield United, you have Alfie Gilchrist down in 8th. And that, 6.93 is his rating. It kind of sums Alfie Gilchrist up in my mind, where he is rock solid. He's someone who's come in on loan from Chelsea. He's done a really good job, and he's been a big part of what has made Blades a really solid defensive unit. But he probably maybe lacks a little bit in possession, or a little bit from an attacking standpoint that they might want. You look at his radar, and he's kind of defensive actions is what he's all about. Looking at his shot map, which isn't necessarily important, but you see that a lot of them come kind of centrally and from distance, suggesting, as when you see him, that he often kind of drops inside rather than being one of those fullbacks that will go around the outside. Doesn't offer a great deal in terms of creativity, but relatively tidy on the ball. Isn't someone who's going to necessarily take players on or look to dribble consistently and beat players. Defensively very solid, as we've said, but I think it's an area where Sheffield United can upgrade, and I think they may have done so in Clark, who still offers that really solid defensive solidity. You compare them for duels and for aerial duels and everything else, and for especially recoveries in the final third with Clark, and he is better than Gilchrist for that, which maybe isn't a surprise because he gets further forward more consistently, but it's more in possession where I think he's a better outlet. He is someone that will carry the ball forward. He will look to get forward, as we saw on his debut on Saturday against Derby, and will be a threat in the final third. He's someone who will get around the outside and get to the byline and put crosses in. And again, when you look at his shot map and you see that he's taking more shots, this is last season at Ipswich, all of these stats, I should say, and his are generally from the corner of that penalty box. Again, it shows a player that is more willing to get into those advanced areas on the right-hand side. So, it's not a long-term option. You would assume that if Ipswich come back to the Championship, they'll probably want Clark back, I would expect. But given the position the Blades are in and trying to get over the line, I think upgrading a little bit at right back, bringing in a player that's been there and done it relatively recently, it just gives them that little bit extra dimension from an attacking standpoint, whilst really not losing anything in attack, is a really shrewd piece of business from a team that are doing quite a lot of it in January.
FOTMob's the number one football scores app on a match day, but offers so much more as well. As demonstrated here, any player that you can think of that your team might be linked to or signing, you can build a picture of what they do, how they do it, and so much more using the FOTMob app, which you can download using the link in the show notes.